It's time once again for more FoodSpace. All things food and drink, restaurants, travel, recipes, and cooking tips. There's something for everyone. Taste, sip, learn, and laugh along with us. And now it's time to get into his space, FoodSpace. Here's your host, Chef Michael Glatz.
Welcome to FoodSpace. It's also your space. And today we're going to drink some red wine and have a lot of fun on the show. And it's actually the Nancy and Nancy show today. I have two good friends here from Vero Beach on the show to help sip red wine with me. And of course, everyone knows Nancy Heinrich from Pop-Up Health. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Chef, always a pleasure.
Nice to have you.
Thank you
Not
for
really
having
a
me.
Pop-Up Health episode, but
Well,
there is some health involved in
there's
red wine. We'll
definitely
talk
health
about
aspects,
that in a
yes.
moment. Another great Vero Beach friend, Nancy Klein. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you, Michael. I'm so excited to be here.
Great to have you. And, anybody can come on the show and taste. We drink wine, we drink bourbon, we eat cheese. There's always something to drink and something to eat here on FoodSpace. So if you'd like to be a guest on my show and you live in the Vero Beach area, just pay attention to my Facebook page, either my personal Facebook page or FoodSpace with Chef Michael, and you'll find details there. Things pop up every now and then looking for people to come on the show and taste, and I'm lucky to have the Nancy and Nancy show today.
It's going to be fun.
Great, excellent. So we're going to talk red wine today, It's so, gosh, I don't know about you, but me, and I probably know more than the average person about wine. It's overwhelming. You walk into the supermarket or wherever you buy your wines, a wine shop, spirit shop, and it's overwhelming. Like, where do you start? Where do you begin? And so most of us gravitate towards what we know, right? We're talking red wine. So what are we going for? We're going for Cabernet. We're going for Pinot Noir. We're going for Merlot, right? Because that's what we know. And we kind of are afraid of some of the other varietals just because we don't really know them. They're unfamiliar. So I thought it'd be fun today to pick 3 varietals, each the best in their country that they're from, that are kind of different, that maybe you've seen before, and it's one of those wines you've passed by on the shelf. So it could be interesting and fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all drink red wine, don't we?
Oh, yes.
And we should, right, Nancy? Because it's good for you.
One glass of red wine a day is really good for most people.
How about 2 glasses?
2 glasses, maybe. There's a difference. Men can drink a little more than women, but that generally that's what they'll say. 1 to 2 glasses, but more than that, you're not enjoying the health benefits.
Right.
So
right.
Moderation, just like everything.
Everything else in moderation, right? What might be moderation for one person isn't necessarily for the next.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm happy to be a man, and I'm happy to be of a fairly large build, so I can probably have 3 glasses and be okay.
Right. Right.
Any reason to drink more red wine. Anyhow, let's have some fun. So The first wine, the grape used, this is Casillero del Diablo, which means the Devil's Castle. This is from Chile, and the grape is Carmenere. And it's a grape that almost became extinct. It originated in Bordeaux in the Médoc region. Mm-hmm. And in the late 1700s, 1800s, during the phylloxera outbreak, the grape became extinct there. Well, in Chile, they were growing grapes that they thought were Merlot. They came from France, and they believed them to be Merlot. And it wasn't until the early 20th century that they realized they weren't growing Merlot, they were growing Carmenere, a varietal that was thought to be extinct in the world, now is the #1 grape varietal in Chile, the most planted vineyards in Chile.
Now, does the vineyards there still have some of the original rootstock from France? Do you know? That's
a good question. I don't know about the rootstock versus, the grafting on in that way. I do know that they're not susceptible to phylloxera, so it must be a different rootstock, although it's unclear to me. That's a good question.
We'll have to find out.
We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
But how about you, Nancy? When you wander through the red wine, Nancy one, Nancy K.
Nancy K.
Nancy, how about you, Nancy K? When you wander down the red wine aisle at your favorite market, do you really care about the rootstock, and which is that an issue for you?
I'll tell you right now, I don't know what rootstock is. I know Woodstock.
Okay, Woodstock, not rootstock. Great. Okay.
I don't think they drank this at Woodstock.
Probably didn't.
Not.
Probably didn't. Anyhow, sip a little Carmenere. Let's talk about it. It's got a wonderful nose. I really like the way it smells. Let's talk about tasting wine a little bit for a moment.
Okay.
First of all, always drink your wines at proper temperature. That's really important. We're here in Florida, okay? So people say, oh, you drink red wine at room temperature, right? You drink wine at room temperature if you're in Bordeaux, not if you're in South Florida, right? And that's why people down here tend to shy from red wines a little bit, right? Because now they want something more cool and refreshing. While wine, yes, can be refreshing, it's a different kind of beverage. You don't necessarily drink wine to be refreshed. You drink it to enjoy with what you're eating, right? And have some fun, lots of flavor and so on. So most of us keep our red wine on the counter too warm, right? So my rule is I put my red wine in the refrigerator half an hour before I'm going to open it.
It's a good rule.
And that's just enough, not to chill the wine, but to take that warmth out of it, to kind of temper the temperature, if that makes sense, right?
Now, what about opening a bottle and letting it sit before you drink?
Okay, so generally speaking, the wines that we drink on a daily basis, most of us look in that, $10 to $15 price range. They tend to be very young, okay? So they will benefit from opening in advance, right? Because what you're doing is you're expediting the aging process. Because they're on the lower scale of the price point, they aren't wines that are going to develop into these great things just by opening them in advance. But they will have a little bit more flavor if you open them in advance. We like to think of decanting old wines, and we do that to remove the sediment from the wine to make our glasses a little cleaner, right? But the other thing that decanting does is it helps rapidly age the wine. When I drink these less expensive wines, I always tend to decant them right at the table just at service time because it oxygenates them, makes them taste better, opens up their flavors a little bit. If you don't have a decanter, that's what this little swirling thing is about that us wine geeks are constantly doing with our coffee, with our orange juice. If you've ever been out to a wine tasting with me, I usually have wine splashed across the front of my shirt because I swirl a little too aggressively. I get excited. I don't know. But that also oxygenates the wine, aerates it a little bit, right? Opens up the flavors. It smells. You can smell a little bit better. And it improves the taste. When you put it in your mouth, take the sip into your mouth, bring a little air into it, make that little gurgling noise like when you slurp Jell-O off the spoon as a kid or that piece of spaghetti, right? Make that little, what you're doing is you're oxygenating the wine on your tongue, right? And then keep your mouth closed and treat the wine like mouthwash. Let it rinse around the inside of your mouth a little bit. And then when you swallow the wine, exhale with your mouth closed, exhale through your nose, and that accentuates the flavors that you're tasting throughout the wine. And I think if you do that, at least on your first or second sip, every time you open a bottle of wine, you'll start to learn and appreciate wine a little bit more, right? That's just absolutely lovely.
It's got some really nice body.
Right, really nice body. Little on the lighter style. It's not punching you in any way, right? It's drinking nice and easy. The tannins are kind of soft, right? Great wine for simple foods, cheeses. Are you craving anything sipping this wine? Does it make you want to go home and cook something?
No, cheese and cracker sounds great.
Right?
To
I mean,
me
a great light red wine that's easy sipping, right? Maybe for starting a meal, right? Some simple hors d'oeuvres, right? Some little bit of blue cheese or really any kind of cheese.
Have a glass while I'm cooking dinner.
Have a glass while you're cooking dinner. Splash a little in the sauce. Right? This is the wine to do that with, right? Makes a great
marinara sauce. Right? Have a little splash in there.
This grape varietal in Chile, and I'm sort of getting it a little bit. In the nose, you can often get some essence of chocolate, a little bit of cocoa, right? And I'm kind of getting that in the nose a little bit. It's really nice. And I also feel like I smell a little coffee, a little faint.
A little coffee or a little woodsy flavor.
Really nice. Okay, let's go on to wine. I could just keep drinking the first one, but we have two more to taste. Let's go on to our second wine. This one is from Spain by the winery called the bodega called Marqués de Caceres. Right? Very well known in the Rioja region. And the grape varietal here that most have never heard of is called Tempranillo.
Tempranillo.
Right? Which actually comes from the Spanish word temprano, which means early, because the Tempranillo grape tends to ripen quicker than traditional varietals like Cabernet and Merlot. So that's kind of where the name of the grape comes from. Very old grape in Spain, very popular in the Rioja region. And this is a crianza. When you buy wines, Spanish wines, you oftentimes will see on the label either crianza, reserva, or gran reserva. And that means how much time the wine has been aged. Okay, so for a crianza, the wine is usually aged at least a year in oak and at least a year in the bottle before it's released. So it's a young wine. A crianza is a young wine. When you get to Reserva, I kind of forget all the Reserva is, it has to be aged at least 3 years before it's released, and at least one of those years has to be in oak. And then a Gran Reserva needs to be aged at 5 years and at least 18 months in oak. So you can see as they go up, they spend a little bit more time in oak, a little bit more time in the bottle before they're released, because wines take on certain character in the oak barrel, particularly red wines, right? And then they also continue to age once they're in the bottle, right? So these are release points. This wine in particular from Marquis de Caceres, I believe, while the requirement is a minimum of 6 months in oak and 6 months in the bottle, they age it a minimum of 1 year on oak and 1 year in the bottle before they release it. So,
well, how does that compare to the first one? How long was that in oak?
That's a good question, Nancy, and I don't know. I don't know the Casillero del Diablo how much time it spends in oak. I know it has some oak aging because we weren't getting a lot of essence of oak. You talked about a little bit of wood in the nose on that first wine. It spent some time in oak, but probably not as much time as the Tempranillo did.
Okay.
So let's have a sip. What a beautiful ruby red color, which is very classic of Tempranillos.
The great legs on it too.
I love the smell.
It's interesting in the nose. I get a little bit of what I'm going to call like balsamic. Don't think vinegar, but think that rich balsamic nose that you might have when you smell balsamic vinegar, if you can remove the acidity part of it. And I'm feeling like I get a little bit of
I'm loving this one.
Totally different now. It's a lighter bodied wine than the first one.
Right. But a little bit spicier, maybe. Would you say that, right? Might stand up to, whereas the first wine was maybe just a great sipping or cocktail wine. Here, I feel more comfortable introducing food to the next level. Paella, right? Think of all the wonderful flavors in paella, the saffron, little chorizo, some seafood, lots of garlic,
great
right?
lasagna
And the
with
spiciness
lots
of this. Lasagna, sure, a nice lasagna, red sauce, so not just think Spanish food, but food with those types of flavors. Really wonderful, right? And I think that's
so it'd really be a nice complement to those foods that have strong flavors.
It's wonderful. I love this one.
Absolutely. Isn't that great? Really, a little bit, the fruit is more succulent, more ripe, I think, than what I was getting in the first
wine.
That's
the first aroma I got is the fruit. I went,
That's us dancing through the vineyards right now.
That's it.
Great.
Picking some grapes.
All right, let's go on to wine number 3.
Get some Tempranillo.
This wine comes from Australia, from a winery known as 19 Crimes. Which has got an interesting story behind it. I won't go through the whole story, we don't have enough time. But essentially, and I think this was the late 1700s, there was a list of 19 different crimes in Britain. And if you were convicted of any of these crimes, your sentence, if it wasn't a death sentence, was transportation. Okay? And they would transport you to Australia. And most criminals didn't make the voyage. Okay? So any of these 19 crimes, we're not going to give you death. We're going to give you transportation. That was your punishment.
A free trip to Australia.
Well, that sounds interesting.
But think about it. In the olden days,
late 1700s. You can imagine what it was like on a boat from England to Australia.
I would not have made it.
Most criminals didn't make it, and the ones that did sort of started to colonize Australia. They were rebels. They were people of bold character, you can imagine, and so on. So that's how the winery thinks of themselves. But we're here to talk about red wine and grape varietals, not crimes. So the grape varietal here is Shiraz, which is the same grape that we know as Syrah in the Rhone region, right? The famous the famous grape of Hermitage in the Rhone region, right? But grown in Australia. When I think of a French Hermitage or Syrah grape, I think of a little bit more peppery and spicy notes. But in Australia, the grape does a little bit differently, and I think it's much more fruity. It's sort of really jammy, luscious fruit. So let's give that a taste.
All right.
Indeed. Right? That's a fruit bomb for sure.
Oh,
nice.
yes.
Right? Nice medium bodied.
Very nice.
Australian Shiraz can really tip the scales and have be really full-bodied wines in a higher price point that actually can take a lot of aging on. But in this price point, really drinkable, really fun, packed full of fruit flavor. Let's drag that Weber grill out now. Throw on a big steak for me, for Nancy.
Portobello mushroom.
Portobello, how about that, huh?
Yeah.
Portobello
grill
mushroom.
that, throw a little pesto in it
Perfect.
with some quinoa or
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
a nice little grain to throw in the middle
Right,
of the...
with some toasted walnuts in the quinoa, maybe,
yeah,
right?
yep,
And suddenly, what do you think,
I want
Nancy?
fish. I want some good mahi or a nice big chunk of swordfish.
Sure,
That's what I'm thinking.
sure. Think of something like mahi that has that can have rich flavors, right? Now take that mahi and make maybe a nice salsa with fresh mangoes, a little jalapeno, lots of cilantro, maybe a touch of coriander in there, maybe even a little cumin in there, maybe a little cumin in the oil you might brush on the mahi before you throw it on the grill. And of course, grilling adds a lot of flavor too. So I immediately want to grill that mahi, right? So here we've got a nice big steak dinner, we got a great seafood dinner, and we got a great vegan dinner, right? And a delicious wine to share with it. Isn't that fun? Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You.
Wonderful.
It was
Thanks.
a pleasure
Thanks,
sipping some of these interesting red wine varietals. Remember, think Tempranillo, Carmenere, right? And
Shiraz.
Shiraz.
Shiraz from
Great.
Australia.
Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Okay.
We'll see you soon on
Cheers.
another episode of Food Space. Cheers.